Hello, my name is Sally Ibbotson and I'm a registered mindfulness coach. I'm also an artist, as you can see by the rather messy studio that I'm in. And this is, I hope, a succinct talk about the 8-week mindfulness program that I'm running, known as MBSR MBCBT, with quite a mouthful of a title, I'm afraid. So it's mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, and then mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. So a little bit about the history of this program. It was designed, if you like, by someone called Jon Kabat-Zinn, and there's much about him on the internet. He was born in 1944, and he was a molecular biologist working in Massachusetts. And he was a PhD of some repute, so he had a good reputation. He was working in labs, doing some good work. However, he felt unfulfilled. And so he left his job, his rather good job in Massachusetts, and he chose to study Zen Buddhism for 10 years. And in those days, so we're looking at 1965 to 1975, that was quite an unusual thing to do, especially in America, where your career was all. But he left. He still maintained good networks and communication with his colleagues in Massachusetts. And he studied under Zen Buddhist. He studied Zen Buddhism all over the world under many different teachers. After 10 years, he then had a moment in a forest where he realized that what would fulfill him is to merge his work in Massachusetts, his work as a biologist, with his learnings on Zen Buddhism and bring to the Western mind some of the practices from what he had been studying. And he realized that mindfulness practices, slightly altered for our Western minds, regular habit-forming meditations, although often we don't call them meditations, we call them practices. So people aren't put off. They don't think that they have to sit for a long time, which you don't. And also informal mindfulness, which is doing something that you already do, but doing it slower and paying attention. Why would we do this? Let me just go back to Kabat-Zinn for a minute. So by 1990, he had returned to Massachusetts and he had set up a stress reduction clinic, he figured it would take 8 weeks for somebody to really get a habit. Introducing the MBSR, the mindfulness-based stress reduction, initially just that, the mindfulness-based stress reduction. And he immediately, because he had a good reputation and because he still had colleagues, he was referred, a lot of patients were referred to him, and often those patients would have on their medical record beyond treatment. People just didn't know what to do with them. Often it was people who had deep trauma, depression, addiction as well, and anxiety. And so he had a lot of people to do research with, and there was a lot of research done, and you can find a lot of research on the effects of the 8-week mindfulness program. However, what he realized, and by now he had Dr. Mark Williams on board. Dr. Mark Williams is now the head, the lead of the Oxford Mindfulness Programme, and has just written a book called Deeper Mindfulness, which I highly recommend. So they had kind of paired up, and they realised that what was happening was that all well and good during the 8 weeks when people were supported and held, but then afterwards, the thoughts, the underlying thoughts, and thought patterns would re-emerge, and so people would stop doing their practices and everything would spiral down again. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes. So they added cognitive therapy as a way to the program, as a way to address the negative thinking alongside mindfulness. So mindfulness of thoughts is a big part of the 8-week program and challenging those thoughts. I'd say now that the 8-week mindfulness program is not therapy. It never has been. It's a way of becoming aware of our needs. So therapy might be something that we'd consider if we are not already in therapy, but it's not therapy. And I am not a qualified psychotherapist or a psychologist. I do have a coaching background and I have a counselling background as well. But the 8-week program is equally run by people who have neither of those qualifications. And so, yeah, it's open to all, I would say. And I'd say that about religion and spirituality. You don't have to know anything about Zen Buddhism to do this program. So, other things to mention about Jon Kabat-Zinn. He wrote a really good book called Full Catastrophe Living, which I'd highly recommend. And he also opened it's called the Cambridge Zen Clinic, which is still in Massachusetts, I believe. And again, in those days, the 70s, and, and also that he was a scientist. That was a huge thing to do. He was both privileged and very special as well, to risk his career by opening this somewhat weird, in those days, clinic. So full respect to him. So what does the 8-week program comprise? Well, first of all, there's a free consultation. So we meet online and in face, if you're near me, I'm in northeast Scotland, to assess for about an hour if the mindfulness program is good for you, to do a little bit of testing exercises, presenting to you some of the things that we would do during the 8 weeks, definitely making sure that you have time to do it as well. So it does require a time commitment, which I'll talk about in a moment. We meet every week if you decide to do it. We put aside an hour and a half, although usually our call or time together doesn't take that long. Usually it takes about an hour and a quarter, excuse me. But we allow some time to settle from that. And in that meeting, we would talk about the week that's just gone, and we would also set goals and objectives in terms of mindfulness for the next week. And I'll go through what kind of thing that would be in a moment. Usually I say to people they need 40 minutes a day, and that's definitely not sitting in meditation. Sometimes it is 15, 20 minutes of just watching the breath. If that doesn't suit, there's many other things that one can do. So the 8 weeks is also about exploring what's good for you. And but the 40 minutes also comprises some contemplations, which again I'll go through in a minute, of various qualities that might help us, and also something called informal mindfulness, which I think I've explained, but I will go through that again. Every day there will be prompts sent to you, either about something that you're working on, or let me give you an example. So, for example, if you are working on looking at what triggers you in life, we encourage ourselves, and I always do the 8-week program with whoever I'm working with, to just stop every now and then. Take a breath, watch yourself. We get into that habit of pausing. People won't notice that you're pausing, but you just pause and take a breath. And an awful lot of information comes from that. It's, I enjoy this, I am triggered by this, etc., etc. So it's about self-awareness, and prompts would be sent to you to do that throughout the week. if that's what you're working on. Also send stories and metaphors. So, for example, this week, someone's working with the Rumi poem, The Guest House, which some of you may know. If not, it's worth looking up. The idea that we accept thoughts rather than push them away, that thinking is something that we do. So trying to push it away is a battle that we might set up, and so on. So my history, a little bit of my history is that I was working in the NHS. I was teaching Qigong and all sorts of things. And the one thing about mindfulness that is special to the MBSR, MBCT program is that it's evidence-based. And so the NHS is able to offer it. And so that's where I came across it. That's where I did my 8-week program in London while I was working in the NHS. And it's why I trained as a teacher sometime later. So it's got a lot of research behind it. It's now offered in prisons, in the NHS, in the UK, in political spheres, in the military, in schools, and in business. And mindfulness at work is kind of a flowering industry, I would say. So the research shows that mindfulness can reduce stress, or it does reduce stress. There's evidence. It increases pain management, increases clarity and focus, creativity, concentration, reduces depression, increases confidence and resilience, and rapport, so relationships can improve as well. Lots of evidence out there if you choose to have a look. To conclude this talk, I will just run through the 8 weeks and in terms of one subject that we might cover and talk a little bit about that. So I'm looking up because I'm reading from flip charts that I do in face-to-face presentations. And so week 1, we might look at the concept of autopilot. An example of that would be driving from A to B. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I think, how on earth did I get here? My mind was just somewhere else. And so we look at the times when we might be in autopilot, and that's fine because I can think about something. I can maybe be a bit creative while I'm having that drive. However, if I'm walking through a forest wanting some relaxation and my mind won't switch off, that's something else. That might be akin to missing out on something. So we look at the areas where we might be on autopilot. We introduce the idea of watching the breath. The breath is always with us. It's never on autopilot. It's always really here. So we introduce that. And 1 or 2 informal mindfulness tasks, typically eating a meal a bit slower, paying attention to taste, and maybe just something simple like brushing your teeth or driving, actually, as well. So week 1, week 2, we focus on the body. The body is the other element that we carry around with us and we're able to anchor into at any time to tell us that we're here now. You know, if we're walking through that forest, perhaps a little bit of walking mindfully, watching the feet on the ground might be good. Feeling the footfall might be good also. So we do something called a body scan, which is literally just going through the body and becoming aware of each part in turn. So we get used to checking into the body. So the body can be a really good information source. How are we when we're triggered? Are we tight, etc.? It can be a really good exploration for us that's easily done as well. Easily done. So we tell stories. So, for example, on week 3, we have a story about, well, I won't tell the whole story, but the story leads to the idea that sometimes our habits are very, very comfortable, and how hard it is to change habits, even if there might be something that brings joy into our life. It can still feel uncomfortable to bring something new into our lives. So giving ourselves some self-compassion and just looking at how our habits are comfortable, but are they still serving us? So it's that kind of inquiry. And usually people take up journaling of some sort, or literally just note taking, so that they can make a deeper inquiry into their habits. Looking at week 4, again, I've already mentioned that we really encourage ourselves to slow down and pause, even imperceptibly, even at work when colleagues perhaps haven't noticed that you're doing anything. And any anchor will do, taking a breath, feeling the weight of yourself on the chair. So we get into the habit of giving ourselves little pauses, with the idea that we don't need to react quickly all the time. And perhaps that's good for our relationships and good for our health too. So we explore that. We do mindful movement. Perhaps you already have, you go to the gym perhaps, or you have a running practice, or you go to yoga, or you do yoga. And we look at how we can do some of that mindfully, so staying in the moment. And if the mind will pull us away from whatever we're wanting to focus on, practicing self-compassion so that we bring ourselves gently back to what we're doing. And, this is all about novelty as well. The Western mind likes novelty. So we're doing something different every week for sure. And as I said, we're also finding out what's good for us and what's not. Contemplation, so running through this, Jon Kabat-Zinn noticed that there were certain contemplations that his teacher would suggest, such as beginner's mind. An example would be that we walk every day, but a beginner's mind, we might unpack how we walk, slow right down, put the foot down mindfully, etc. So yeah, the contemplations are around acceptance 1 week, non-striving another week. And they're not meditations, they're something that you can think about, write about over a cup of tea. And what we usually find is they kind of come through, they weave through the week. It's just, oh yeah, acceptance is an option here rather than doing battle. Or non-striving can sometimes work. Sometimes if I have a day when I thought, okay, I'm not going to do much at all, I get an awful lot done because there's something about non-striving that's sometimes quite productive, actually. It's the opposite of multitasking, if you like. And then we look at what's sustaining us in our life and what's draining us and ways to rebalance, and where we can fit in informal mindfulness into that. So I always give an example myself. A little thing that drains me is I don't like emptying the dishwasher at the end of the day. I really appreciate it being empty in the morning, but I use that as my informal mindfulness. So I really tune into what the cutlery feels like, slow down in placing it where it needs to be placed, feel my body moving, and that's my informal mindfulness done. So I think that's rather neat. By week 8, we're starting to look at how we can plan to bring mindfulness and keep it in our lives. So what can we do to keep mindfulness? What do we need? Do we need groups? Do we need other people? Do we need triggers, like to ongoing prompts, if you like? What do we need to keep it in our life? And there's always a gift retreat day. It's 4 hours on a particular day, and it's some weeks from the end of the 8-week program, where we can check in and see how it's going and do some mindfulness together. And again, just use that time to reflect on how mindfulness has improved our lives and also how it can improve more. Thank you very much for listening. I have put my contact, you can contact me through the comments box below, and I'll get a nice prompt into my email box and reply as soon as possible. The price is $180 for the 8-week course, I don't think there's anything else that I need to say. Thank you so much for watching.